midnight screams.
Every year, I receive an unmarked envelope on Halloween. I can't stand Halloween. Whenever October rolls around, I get a sinking feeling in my stomach that doesn't go away until the month is over, and sometimes not until December. Most people I tell this to are quick to label me as a cranky, bona fide Halloween time, Ebenezer Scrooge, telling me to just lighten up and enjoy the spooky season. That is, until I explain why. When I reveal my reasoning as to why I can't stand the holiday, suddenly my disdain makes a lot more sense. For the past 11 years, on the morning of October 31st, I have received a photograph of a dead body, always by mail, always in the morning, and always on Halloween. It does not matter if I move, if I change my name, or even if the mail is intercepted. One way or another, I will receive this unwanted Halloween trick. I don't know why they are sent. I don't know who is sending them. And I don't know why I, of all people, am their target. The only thing I know is that I received them, and that I have to view them. This all started 11 years ago, when I first moved out of my parents' house and into a new place with my best friend at the time, Astrid. We were both 19, and more than a little eager to get our first taste of adult freedom that only came with not living with our parents. Don't get me wrong, my folks were great, but I was ready to move on and begin the next chapter in my life. Astrid's reasoning was, comparatively, a bit more sour. She just looking for any excuse to no longer share a roof with the drunk, gaslighting prick that was her father. When we first moved in, things were fine. The apartment was small, but not falling apart. The neighborhood was close to a discount grocery store. We both had stable enough employment, and the rent was actually fairly reasonable for two young college kids. It was far from perfect, but it was serviceable and affordable. And when you're just starting out, those are borderline luxuries. The worst thing that happened in those first few weeks was our sink suddenly leaking, and even then, we were able to get our elderly neighbor to fix it for us. The guy was so nice he refused to let us pay him, and even when we tried leaving an envelope with some money in his mailbox, we just found it slipped right back under our door the morning after. All this to say that we were happy, we were content, and we were comfortable. The first picture arrived the same year we moved in. We had been living in our apartment for about 4 months now, enough time to acquaint ourselves with the neighbors, get a stable routine going, and get the place actually feeling like home. Astrid and I had designated chores and responsibilities we both kept to, and one of mine was getting the mail. Most days, that just meant bills, credit card offers, catalogs for stores, and maybe the odd collection of coupons for any number of fast food places. On that Halloween morning, however, while shuffling through the assortment of useless junk, I found a plain white envelope. I immediately knew that something was up with the letter, as there were no postmarkings anywhere on the envelope, not even a stamp. The only thing on it were 2 words, crudely written in plain black ink with what looked to be shaky handwriting. To Jennifer. Immediately curious, I set down the rest of the mail when I got back to the apartment and opened the envelope. Inside was a carefully folded digital photo of a woman, maybe my age, lying with her eyes closed on a bed with a green comforter in a near pitch-black room. The woman's frame was illuminated by the glow of what I can only assume was a camera flash, revealing dark black hair and a peaceful expression on her face. I didn't know she was dead at the time, so I was more confused than anything, turning the photo over a few times to see if I was missing anything. But no, there was no date, no inscription that might have labeled some specific event. Nothing. From the looks of it, it was just an odd photo of what I thought was a sleeping woman that I didn't recognize. Okay. Weird, I said to myself. What's weird? Astrid's voice startled me, almost causing me to jump as I turned around to face her. My friend was still in pajama pants and a tank top, with her raven black hair tied up in a bun behind her head. This photo. Do you know the girl in this picture? I asked. Astrid raised an eyebrow as I held out the picture for her to take, which she did. She stared at the photo for a bit, turning it and squinting as she did. Eventually, she just pursed her lips and shook her head. Never seen her before. Why? She asked. Because this just came for me in the mail. I held up the empty envelope as I answered her, positioning it so she could see my name on the paper. She stared at it for a minute, then back to the photo in clear confusion. She's not a friend of yours? She asked. I shook my head. Can you just send it back? To where? I asked back, holding the envelope up again. There isn't even a return address on this thing. Where would I send it? Astrid just shrugged. After a few minutes of baffled back and forth, we ultimately decided that the letter was probably just some weird holiday prank and agreed to put the matter behind us. In hindsight, I know that was a mistake, but that is 20/20, as they say. The rest of the year passed without incident, and by Thanksgiving, while I hadn't forgotten the mystery photo, I had stopped worrying about it. Most of the next year was equally uneventful, save for the both of us trying desperately to avoid the drunken, angry phone calls from Astrid's father telling her to come home. By Halloween of the following year, I had almost completely disregarded the photo. I know that sounds kind of absurd, but I honestly thought it was just some weird prank at the time. I mean, one odd photo on Halloween, a day second only to April Fools for pranks and tricks, does not a red flag make. No, that red flag would start to raise a year later, when after bringing in the mail and sitting down with Astrid, we discovered another plain blank envelope, save for my name. For a moment, neither of us said anything, or even really reacted at all to the postage. I obviously can't speak for Astrid, but I was just too stunned in the moment to really think, let alone speak. When I did finally think, it was only in the form of a single question. Another one of these things? Astrid asked, as she picked up the envelope and twirled it in her fingers. As I snapped out of my daze and glanced up at her, I wondered if she was aware that she had just vocalized my own question. Yeah, looks like it, I replied. I had tried to sound dismissive, as if the second letter didn't bother me at all, as if its mere presence hadn't stunned my roommate and me into silence only a few moments ago. Thankfully, Astrid didn't seem to notice my effort, and casually tossed the envelope back on the table. And you still have no idea who might have sent it? She asked, as she leaned back and crossed her arms. I looked back at the envelope, trying my best to recognize the handwriting, as I thought through any prankster friends or weird neighbors who could have left it. While we had discussed possible culprits for the mystery mail a few times over the past year, it was never to a very deep or dedicated extent. Probably because of that, we never actually came up with any solid guesses. After sitting for maybe a minute, I realized I still didn't. Not a one, I admitted. Still more confused than I was scared, I picked up the envelope and carefully began to open it. "You're actually gonna open that thing?" Astrid asked with a half chuckle. I only replied with a shrug as I pulled out what looked to be another folded piece of paper. I half expected to see another random, sleeping person. What I saw instead made my heart drop. The second photo depicted a Hispanic-looking man as he lay on his belly atop what looked to be old carpet. The man's hands and arms were outstretched across the floor, his face turned to the side and noticeably pale. That's not to say that his face was completely colorless, as there was a massive purple and pinkish bruise on the side of his face. Most alarming of all was what looked to be a crimson pool of blood under the man's head, and a dried stream of red dripping from his nose. I'm not sure if I can accurately describe what I felt as fear. I was shocked, absolutely, and definitely a little disgusted. I suppose the best way to describe my exact feeling in the moment is to say I felt threatened. Maybe that's why I reflexively threw the photo onto the table. "Ew, ew, ew! What in God's name is that?" I shrieked as I flailed my hands, like they'd actually touched a stranger's viscera. The picture, as if it somehow knew I didn't want to see it, flipped in the air as it gently floated towards the table, landing face down as it came to a stop. It was only after the photo was out of my hands that I started having any coherent thoughts, though even that was just panicked questions. Was that man dead? Why was he dead? Who had taken his picture? Was it legitimate or still a prank? Above all else, though, all I could muster in my head was, why? 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 Seeing my undignified freak out, Astrid got a curious look in her eye and took the photo off the table, wincing and scrunching her face once she looked at it. "Ugh, that's gnarly," she said in a disgusted tone. "Gnarly?" I asked, stupefied that she could be so calm. "Astrid, is that a real dead body?" My friend, no doubt sensing my distress, looked up at me with a mix of sympathy and what I can only describe as a, "Did you really just ask that? Look, Jen, it's not a dead body." She'd sounded certain when she said it, almost admonishing, like I was an idiot for even considering the idea. If I'd been in my right mind, I'm sure I would have been offended that she'd been so dismissive. In the moment, however, my mind was a mess. "How do you know? How do you know?" Panic rising, I pressed my hands to my head, suddenly feeling very light of breath and like I was about to pass out. Without even realizing it, I'd begun to spiral. I pictured some shadow of a man bursting into our apartment, approaching me slowly and doing unspeakable things to me. No, 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 please, no. What if there's like a serial killer running around and he's taking like these weird photos of his victims? What if I'm next? What if, suddenly, I felt one of my hands be gently pulled away from my head, a comforting warmth placed on top of it. "Girl, breathe. Just breathe and calm down," Astrid said, cutting me off. Her voice was still stern, but had now taken on an unmistakably soothing tone. Placing my free hand over my beating chest, I tried to compose myself as I looked at my friend, my eyes clouding up as I realized I'd begun crying. Astrid just smiled and sat with me patiently, holding my hand as I tried my best to relax, to tell myself I was okay. After a few minutes, I'd managed to mostly calm down, though I was still shaking a bit. Astrid, patient as ever, sat with me a little bit longer, rubbing the top of my hand in an effort to reassure me. Finally, she spoke softly to me. "Jen, it is Halloween. People pull pranks on Halloween. You're okay." She turned out to be right. By the end of the day, not only had we not been targeted by a serial killer, but I had met a genuinely kind and cute guy at a party. With Astrid's help pressuring, we even exchanged numbers, and I learned his name, Isaac. I was maybe a little bit more jumpy than normal, but that was easy enough to explain away to anyone unaware as the spooky season. All in all, it was a great day and a more than pleasant holiday experience. Still, as I tried to sleep that night, my mind would drift to the photo of the dead man. Yes, I was still convinced he was dead, and to the first photo I'd received. How were those two photos connected? Had she been dead too? She hadn't looked like it, but what other reason could there be that I'd received both? Why had I received them at all? Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. Over the course of the next year, I tried digging into the photos as best I could. Unfortunately, I had almost nothing to work with, as Astrid had already thrown out both of the photos by the time I had decided to look into things. All these years later, I still don't blame her. For all she and I knew, they were just mean-spirited pranks that weren't worth holding on to. Still, this lack of physical evidence made asking questions of the neighbors incredibly awkward. Before you judge them too harshly, though, I'd probably be a bit creeped out by some random woman asking about murder pictures, too. Likewise, going to the police, at least in my mind, felt kind of like a non-starter. Without the photos, all I had was my word, and nothing to actually show for it. As for message boards online, my most common response was advice for dealing with sexual harassment, which, while appreciated, wasn't really what I was looking for. To put it simply, I couldn't find anything. Even when I enlisted the help of Isaac, who, bless his heart, believed me 100% about the whole thing, we couldn't find a single shred of something we could use to understand what was going on. I had wanted to ask Astrid for her help too, but she was dealing with her dad more and more that year, and the screaming matches honestly just sounded painful. The last thing I wanted, when she was already so stressed, was to add my garbage on top of her. By the beginning of October, I realized then that I really only had one option left to me. Assuming this mystery mailer pulled the same prank as he had the years prior, I would have to wait for him to act again before I could have evidence. Then I could go to the police, explain what had happened, then just maybe I would have him. Just one more year, I convinced myself. When Halloween rolled around that year, I admit that I practically leapt from my bed and ran to get the mail. In my mind, I could picture a scraggly-looking man being hauled away in handcuffs, desperately pleading that it was just a joke. Likewise, I pictured a large and bulky man being forced to the ground as police swarmed him, grunting as he fought uselessly against the officers restraining him. I'm not sure if this makes me a bad person or not, but I relish the idea of seeing this imagined creep getting overpowered like that, letting him feel scared for once. It maybe then also makes me a bad person. Then that I was almost shocked. Then angry to see Astrid already at our table, mail spread out before her. I wanted to scream. What was she doing? I always grabbed the mail. That was my job. Why was she screwing things up now, of all days? I realized years later that wasn't fair, that Astrid couldn't possibly have known what I was planning. Still, in the moment, I had to compose myself, taking a deep breath as I slowed my pace and forced a smile. You know, it's my job to get the mail, right? I playfully admonished as I walked up to the table and sat down. I was already out. Figured I'd grab it, she replied, tossing aside what looked to be another credit card offer. Maybe I was just paranoid, but I had the distinct impression that she wasn't telling me something. Don't get me wrong, I had no reason to think that. My friend was acting and talking completely normally, right down to the bored expression and haphazard dismissal of any of the mail. It was more like a sixth sense, like a natural pre-built alarm that was going off in my head. I didn't actually want to accuse her of anything, though, so I tried to just let it go. Okay, anything for me? I asked, probably a little too eagerly. Thankfully, Astrid didn't seem to pick up on that, and just shook her head as she looked at another piece of mail disinterestedly. Nope, she replied. It felt like my heart stopped for a moment. No? What does she mean, no? No blank envelopes with my name on them? None at all? Not this year, babe. She was lying. She had to be. Why would this guy just suddenly stop? He wouldn't. He couldn't. Not when I had finally worked up the courage to do something. Astrid had to be lying, or maybe she had just missed it. Glancing at the table, I quickly scanned the discarded envelopes and papers for any sign of something with my name, even ones that weren't handwritten. Nothing. I saw. Nothing. This didn't make any sense. How could there be nothing? Even when I took the envelopes and the coupons or whatever else was in the pile and inspected them, I couldn't find anything. Nothing addressed to me in an odd way. No handwritten labels, just bills, useless junk, and more bills. In my frantic grabbing, I failed to notice Astrid giving me a slightly amused look. You want to take apart the mailbox too? She asked with a chuckle. I didn't know what to say. I should have been relieved, ecstatic even that there was nothing there. It was over, I thought. Shouldn't I be happy? Why was I so disappointed? No, it's just weird that it stopped, I admitted, trying to save face. Even at the time, I thought it was strange that I described it as weird. Not getting a photo of a dead body was weird. How had I gotten so used to it in just 2 years? Was I really so eager to get the guy doing it in trouble that I was upset that I didn't get anything? What was wrong with me? Looking back, I know I was wrong. I should have pushed harder, grilled Astrid about what she had done. I should have kept asking questions or kept looking around. I should have kept digging. Maybe if I had, Astrid wouldn't have gone missing in November of that year. There was no warning, no letter, no talk, nothing. One day she just got up to go to work, and when I got home from my own job, she wasn't home. At first, I wasn't really worried. Astrid had always been more social than me. Maybe she was just out with some other friends. So I waited for her to get home that night. Then I waited for a day. Then, by the following night, I tried calling her. Then I tried calling her again, and again, and again. Every time I would get a single ring, then a disconnect, before the line went dead. Call me paranoid, but I knew something had happened. I wasn't sure if she was in danger, or had been kidnapped, killed, whatever. but she was in danger. I knew it. I called all of our mutual friends to try and find her, see if any of them knew where she was. At one point, I was even so desperate that I tried calling her meat sack of a father. "What does it matter? She's no good to me anymore," was all he said. My blood practically boiled at his response. No good to me, I thought. My best friend, HIS daughter, was missing, and he didn't even care in the slightest? I'd always known he was a garbage person, but this felt like an all-time low. I swear I could have throttled him if he were in the same room as me. As it was, I had to settle for calling the cops. I remember reading somewhere that you have to wait 48 hours to be taken seriously for reporting a missing person. Thankfully, that ended up being a myth, as after my call, cops were at my door within an hour. I won't go over everything they asked. Honestly, I can barely remember everything myself. Just that they asked questions like where she worked, if this was her primary domicile, that sort of thing. I don't remember how long the questioning lasted, only that I was exhausted by the end of it. The police couldn't share everything they uncovered during their investigation. But from what they did, I got the impression that they genuinely tried their best. For what it's worth, they did find out some good information. Namely, that Astrid had arrived at her job the day she went missing, but rather than driving home afterwards, she confided in her coworkers that she was going to pay a visit to her father's house. I wish I could say from there it was an open and shut case. But from what they were allowed to share with me, the cops told me that she was witnessed entering, and after about 45 minutes, leaving her father's home. They suspected she was on her way home, but needless to say, she never arrived. Worse than that, they never found her car. There was no sign of it on the roads that would have taken her home. Not parked, not wrecked, not even a broken off piece of it. It was like she just up and vanished into thin air. They checked her dad out, of course, but the lump hadn't been seen leaving his house until a good 10 hours after Astrid had left. Since that was more than enough time for her to have gotten home, and because the guy was a shut-in with almost no friends to speak of, he was dropped as a suspect. Honestly, part of me will always think he has something to do with it, but I understand why the police dropped him. By February of next year, I had to move out of the apartment Astrid and I had shared. Rent was already a nightmare on its own, and it's even more so when you're suddenly paying for two people's worth. Isaac, God bless him, was kind enough to take me in. I was honestly more than fine with that. We'd been dating a little over a year by that point, and I really liked him. He stood by me every step of the way, and I must have apologized 1,000 times for being so obsessed with Astrid's case. He would always say the same thing in reply. "She's your best friend, hun. You don't have to explain yourself to me." It was honestly no wonder why we were engaged before the end of the year. We were still living together. I mean, we still are, but that's beside the point. When next Halloween rolled around, Isaac had taken over the duties of grabbing the mail, so I was cozied up in the bedroom, watching some movie that I honestly can't remember the name of. All I remember is that it was some schlocky romance movie, and that I was somewhere in the third act when I noticed Isaac stepping inside our room out of the corner of my vision. "Hey, hun, do you remember those plain envelopes you told me about?" he asked. My chest tightened as I remembered them, muting the TV and focusing intently on my fiancé. Staring more closely, I realized there was a confused look on his face and that he was clutching something in his hand, my chest. tightened even more when I realized what it was. A plain white envelope. Yes, I remember. Why? What did they say on them again? To Jennifer. Isaac looked at the unopened postage and frowned. That's all? Nothing else? Why? I asked, sheepishly pointing to the letter. What does that one say? Isaac glanced back at me for a minute. I could tell he was considering whether or not to hand the envelope to me or not. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if I wanted it, or if I wanted him to throw it away. But then I remembered my plan from the year before. I could still try that, right? Maybe then the police could find Astrid, the guy who did this? Sure, I had no idea if they were even connected, but it was a reasonable assumption, right? Couldn't I at least try? I could feel myself shaking as I sat up and extended an open hand to Isaac. Understandably, he seemed unsure at first. From his perspective, after all, these things were the result of some sick prankster going after his soon-to-be wife. In an effort to reassure him, I smiled the best I could and gently nodded my head. He still seemed antsy, but with a sigh, he relinquished the envelope to me, and I inspected it. I saw immediately why he'd had to double-check with me. Right away, I recognized the same shaky and sloppy handwriting in black ink, exactly as before. Unlike the last two letters, however, this envelope said, "She intervened." My stomach dropped, and I felt the wind leave my gut, like I'd been socked. She? As in Astrid? Before I realized what I was doing, I feverishly opened the envelope and pulled out yet another folded piece of paper. When I unfolded it, I screamed. It was Astrid, hanging from a noose, her skin pale and eyes closed. I don't remember much of what happened next. I know Isaac was there, holding me as I sobbed and screamed. He must have called the cops, because they were swarming the apartment at some point. I'm sure they wanted to ask me questions, but I was pretty much inconsolable at that point. Poor Isaac had to do most of the talking. Through the blur of events, I just imagined my friend screaming, crying, begging for her life. Had she suffered? Had she been aware when she died? Had she fought back? Could I have done anything more to help her? I just wanted answers. Why? Why me? Why her? Why? I don't know. I still don't. I'm sorry, but I don't have any answers. For you, for me, for the cops, no one. There were a few suspects, but they all fell apart for one reason or another. A co-worker was seen driving the same way as her for a while, but he was dismissed thanks to his mom's eyewitness testimony. Her dad was a popular one, but he was pretty much sedentary, so he was out. They even considered me for a while. I think Isaac was more offended by that than I was. I was the person closest to her after all. Eventually, though, they realized I had no motive, and of course, that it couldn't be me when another photo arrived next year, and the year after that, and the one after, and after, to today. Isaac and I are now married, have 2 beautiful children, but still no idea who killed my best friend. Despite moving into a nice 4-bedroom house, we still get the photos in the same plain envelopes. Isaac tried installing cameras by our mailbox, but they never picked anything up. No one ever shows up, and yet we still received those stupid envelopes. Always blank, save for those same 2 words. To Jennifer. Every year, same as always. Halloween is a few days away now, and against my husband's urging, I've decided I had enough. This year, I plan to sit and watch the mailbox all night. Maybe whoever's doing this knows how to avoid a camera, but he won't avoid me. I will see who is doing this, even if it kills me.